Welcome to Motivational Humanity. You are not alone. One day you realize you're exhausted, not from living, but from performing. And the moment you stop, life finally tells you the truth. You start to notice it slowly, almost like a quiet hum in the background of your life, the realization that much of what you do is not really you. You're performing. Smiling when you don't feel like smiling, saying the things you think will make people like you, moving through your days in ways that feel expected rather than chosen. At first it's subtle, almost invisible, and you tell yourself it's normal, but then it grows, this feeling of fatigue that isn't physical but runs through your bones. You feel tired in a way that sleep can't fix. There is a heaviness that comes from holding up a version of yourself that isn't authentic. It's in the small moments that it becomes obvious. You laugh at jokes that don't resonate. You nod along to conversations you don't believe in. You rehearse responses to questions you hope never come. It's not malice or dishonesty. It's survival. From the earliest days, you learn that being seen fully could be risky. You learn that approval mattered more than truth, and safety was measured by others' acceptance. Over time, this performance becomes second nature. You don't even notice the mask until a quiet moment when you're alone and the hum becomes louder, and suddenly you ask yourself, who am I really performing for? And then comes the first pang of something deeper, a kind of sorrow mixed with curiosity. You start to see the costs. The hours spent being someone else have left you disconnected from yourself. Your desires, your fears, your joy, even your sadness feel muted because you've been living someone else's script. There's a strange loneliness in this. Even if your life seems full to the outside world, you realize that the mask protects you from rejection, but it also keeps you from connection, from meaning, from the raw and beautiful truth of life itself. The awareness is uncomfortable. It's not the kind of self-knowledge that feels like an achievement. It feels like being caught in a mirror you can't look away from, seeing all the ways you've bent, shaped, and shrunk to fit what you thought was expected. And yet, awareness is the first step toward freedom. The first step toward discovering what it means to live a life that isn't dictated by approval, a life that is honest, a life that belongs to you. It starts small. You notice when you're changing yourself to fit in. You pause before you say yes out of obligation. You ask yourself why you're reacting the way you are. Is it because it feels right or because it's expected? And in those moments of pause, a kind of courage quietly begins to grow. You start to remember that the real you has value, that your authentic voice matters, and that the mask you've been wearing is only one small part of who you are. I didn't know I was pretending. I thought this was who I had to be. And in this realization, you take your first small step, noticing where you hide, where you bend, where you perform. Because awareness is not judgment. Awareness is a soft light shining into the corners of your life, gently revealing the path toward living fully, honestly, and without apology. You begin to notice the weight of the mask you wear, not in dramatic moments, but in the quiet, ordinary spaces of your life. It's in the way you smile at people, even when your heart feels heavy, in the way you laugh at jokes that barely touch you, in the way you hold yourself back, because saying what you really think or feel might be inconvenient or uncomfortable for someone else. There's a strange kind of tension in existing this way, as if your energy is always split between who you are inside and who you are showing the world. You feel it in your chest, in the subtle tightening of your shoulders, in the exhaustion of carrying a self that isn't fully your own. It's a tension that whispers to you quietly, almost apologetically, that something is off, that the cost of always performing is far higher than you realized. At first, you may try to ignore it. You tell yourself that what you're doing is normal, that everyone bends a little to fit in, that compromise is necessary for harmony. And yet, the more you perform, the less you recognize yourself. The person in the mirror begins to feel distant, as if your reflection belongs to someone else. You catch glimpses of this other person in moments of quiet, and you're startled by how little you actually see of yourself. Who are you beneath the layers of smiles, polite words, and carefully curated behaviors? What parts of you have been hidden for so long that you hardly remember they exist? There is a cost to hiding. It is not immediately obvious, and it does not announce itself with a dramatic fanfare. It comes as small, persistent aches, the moments of dissatisfaction that linger after social gatherings, the evenings spent scrolling through lives that seem more real than your own, the lonely feeling that surfaces even when surrounded by people. You feel a quiet sadness, a longing that you cannot easily name, because it is buried beneath years of learned behavior, approval, acceptance, safety. And yet that sadness is real, and it is persistent. It is the cost of hiding, the price of performing. The mask you wear is a shield, and for a long time you may feel grateful for it. It has kept you safe from judgment, from rejection, from the piercing discomfort of being fully seen. And yet, the very shield that protects you also separates you from the most essential experiences of life, connection, intimacy, freedom, and the authentic expression of who you are. You begin to notice this gap, this space between the self you show and the self you hide. And it is in this noticing that vulnerability quietly enters your life. Vulnerability is not dramatic or heroic at first. It is subtle, almost imperceptible. It is the whisper that asks, what if I tried being seen as I am? What if I risked the possibility of disapproval, misunderstanding, or even rejection in exchange for the chance to be known? And the fear rises immediately. You feel it in the tightening of your stomach, the quickening of your pulse, the way your mind spins scenarios of failure and humiliation. Vulnerability is terrifying because it asks you to step into a space you've been trained to avoid, uncertainty, exposure, and the possibility that you may not be enough. It challenges the deeply held belief that safety comes from performing, from pleasing, from hiding the parts of yourself that might be inconvenient or uncomfortable for others. But the fear is only part of the story. Alongside it, there's a quiet curiosity, a faint stirring of courage that nudges you to consider what life might feel like if you let go of the mask, even just a little. The first attempts are small. You may choose to voice a thought that feels risky, to express an opinion that might be met with disagreement, or to allow someone to see your sadness or frustration without immediately masking it with humor or compliance. These moments are brief and fragile, but they are significant. They teach you that vulnerability is not weakness. It is a kind of strength that requires both courage and honesty. Each act of being seen, even in a small way, carries with it a subtle revelation that the world does not collapse when you are honest, that people are capable of responding with empathy, and that your worth is not dependent on perfection or performance. Vulnerability also illuminates the internal patterns that have kept you performing for so long. You begin to see the ways shame has guided your choices, whispering that you must hide your flaws, conceal your desires, and manage your image to be acceptable. You notice the internal critic, the voice that has measured your worth against the approval of others, and you start to question its authority. You recognize that performing has never truly protected you. It has only delayed the inevitable confrontation with your authentic self. And yet, even in this recognition, you encounter resistance. The habit of hiding is deeply ingrained. The mask feels familiar. There is comfort in the known, even if it is uncomfortable in its own way. This is the paradox of vulnerability. It is terrifying because it is unfamiliar, but necessary because it leads to freedom. The process of allowing vulnerability to enter your life is not linear. You experience setbacks, moments of fear that overwhelm curiosity, times when you retreat back into performance for safety. And this is part of the journey. Vulnerability is not a one-time act, but a practice, a continual choice to show up, be seen, and speak your truth, even when it is uncomfortable. With each act, you notice subtle changes in yourself. Your awareness deepens, your self-compassion grows, and your capacity for empathy expands. You start to see that the people who respond with understanding or kindness were there all along, waiting for the authentic you to emerge, and that those who react harshly or withdraw are reflecting their own fears, not your value. As this understanding takes root, you also notice how performing has shaped your relationships. You may have been close to people, but the closeness was limited by what you allowed them to see. The mask created a barrier, subtle but powerful, between you and others. Vulnerability begins to dissolve that barrier. It allows for a depth of connection that was previously inaccessible. You learn that intimacy grows not from perfection or performance, but from honesty and presence. You begin to experience the profound relief of being known, of being accepted as you are, and it changes the way you move through the world. The moments of vulnerability become milestones in your personal journey. They are the points at which the performance fades and life's honesty enters. You start to see that authenticity is not about being fearless or flawless. It is about choosing presence over perfection, courage over comfort, and truth over approval. You realize that every act of showing up fully, every choice to let your mask slip, carries with it a subtle but profound transformation. Your energy shifts. Your perspective changes. Your relationships deepen. And most importantly, you begin to recognize your own worth, independent of performance or validation. In this space, you also begin to practice gentleness with yourself. You notice the ways you have judged your own vulnerability, criticizing yourself for being too sensitive, too emotional, too exposed. You start to replace that judgment with curiosity and compassion, understanding that the very act of being vulnerable is an achievement, a demonstration of courage, and an expression of your authentic self. You allow yourself to feel, to express, and to exist without the constant filter of performance. This is not easy. It is uncomfortable. It requires patience and persistence, and yet it is liberating in a way that nothing else can be. Through this journey, you discover a subtle but profound truth. Vulnerability is the gateway to living fully. It is not a momentary act, but a lifelong practice. It asks you to notice where you hide, to name your fears, and to choose honesty even when it is hard. It teaches you that strength is not measured by control or perfection, but by the willingness to be seen and known. And in this realization, you find a quiet freedom, a sense of presence that has nothing to do with performance and everything to do with being alive fully and authentically. The mask protected me until it became a prison. This is the point at which awareness deepens into understanding, and understanding begins to shift into action. You start to see the ways in which performing has shaped your life, and you take the first real steps toward living without it. You experiment with honesty, with courage, with presence. You allow yourself to be seen in small ways, knowing that each act, no matter how small, is a declaration of your worth. You learn to listen to yourself, to honor your feelings, and to trust that being authentic will lead not to rejection, but to connection and growth. And with each step, the world begins to feel different, lighter, more expansive, more real. Courage often arrives quietly, almost unnoticed, as you begin to confront the truth of your own life. It is not the loud, dramatic kind of bravery you see in stories or movies. It is the subtle, persistent choice to step forward despite fear, to speak your truth despite discomfort, to move toward what feels uncertain instead of retreating to safety. Courage begins where performance ends, where the masks fall away, and where you are finally willing to show up fully, with all of your imperfections, doubts, and vulnerability intact. You begin to realize that life has been asking you for this quiet bravery all along, and that the moment you choose to answer, everything begins to shift. Fear does not vanish when courage appears. It is always there, like a shadow at your side, whispering doubts, rehearsing worst-case scenarios, reminding you of the risks. You feel it in the pit of your stomach, in the racing of your mind, in the hesitation before speaking a difficult truth. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to act in spite of it. It is the willingness to take the small, deliberate steps toward honesty, presence, and authenticity, knowing that the path is uncertain and the outcome is unknown. You learn that fear and courage are not opposites, but companions, that the depth of your fear often indicates the significance of your potential growth. The first moments of courage are fragile. You may find yourself pausing before a conversation, rehearsing words that feel risky, wondering if it is safer to stay silent. You may hesitate to voice an opinion that challenges the status quo, or to reveal a part of yourself that has long been hidden. And yet, even in these moments, something shifts. The act of considering the choice itself, speak, to show, to step forward, begins to awaken a new sense of agency. You notice that you have more control over your life than you imagined, and that the true risk lies not in acting courageously, but in remaining hidden and silenced. Courage often manifests in the ordinary, everyday moments. It is in the decision to assert your boundaries, to say no when every instinct tells you to comply, It is in the quiet acknowledgement of your own feelings instead of pushing them aside for the comfort of others. It is in the choice to be honest about your desires, your needs, and your limitations, even when it might provoke discomfort or disagreement. These small acts accumulate over time, building a foundation of inner strength that does not rely on external validation or approval. You begin to understand that courage is not a single event, but a practice cultivated in countless small choices made consistently, each one reinforcing the belief that your truth matters. The internal struggle is intense because courage demands that you confront what you have spent years avoiding. It asks you to face your own self-doubt, your insecurities, your fear of rejection, and your longing for approval. You begin to see the ways in which you have minimized yourself, hidden your voice, and muted your presence in order to feel safe. And yet courage invites you to reclaim these parts of yourself, to take ownership of your story, and to stand in the fullness of your being. It teaches you that authenticity is worth the discomfort, and that true growth is impossible without stepping into the unknown. Alongside the fear and hesitation, there is a quiet thrill that comes with courage. It is a subtle recognition that when you speak your truth, you are aligning with your own integrity, and that alignment carries its own sense of freedom. You feel lighter, more present, more connected to the reality of your life. The weight of performing begins to lift, replaced by the clarity that comes from living honestly. Even when the consequences are difficult, even when relationships shift, even when the outcome is uncertain, courage brings with it a sense of dignity, a deep knowing that you are showing up as the person you were meant to be. Courage also reshapes your understanding of failure. You begin to see that failure is not the opposite of courage, but a natural companion to it. To act courageously is to risk failure, to face disappointment, and to encounter resistance. And yet each failure becomes a lesson, a mirror reflecting your growth and resilience. You realize that the real danger is not in failing, but in refusing to act, in remaining hidden, in allowing fear to dictate the limits of your life. Courage reframes your perception of risk, teaching you that the only true loss comes from avoiding the challenges that could bring transformation. The more you practice courage, the more you notice how it permeates every aspect of your life. Your relationships shift because you're no longer operating from fear or performance. You connect more deeply with others because you are willing to show your true self, to ask for what you need, and to receive what others offer with honesty and openness. Your work, your passions, and your personal goals take on new meaning because you approach them from a place of authenticity rather than obligation or expectation. And most importantly, you begin to cultivate an inner voice that is trustworthy, compassionate, and steadfast. A voice that guides you toward choices aligned with your values, rather than choices dictated by fear or external approval. Courage also teaches you patience and gentleness. You learn that showing up fully does not mean doing everything perfectly or always succeeding. It means continuing to act with integrity even when the outcome is unknown, even when mistakes are made, and even when the path forward is unclear. You give yourself permission to be imperfect, to stumble, and to learn, recognizing that vulnerability and courage are intertwined. Each step forward, no matter how small, is an act of bravery, and each act reinforces the belief that living authentically is possible and worthwhile. There is a quiet joy that emerges from living courageously. It is subtle at first, appearing in moments when you speak honestly, connect meaningfully, or allow yourself to be fully seen. It grows as you accumulate these experiences, strengthening your sense of self-worth and deepening your connection to life. You begin to see that courage is not a destination, but a way of being, a choice to live openly, to embrace uncertainty, and to act with integrity even when it is uncomfortable. It is a practice that becomes habitual, a rhythm that carries you forward through challenges, fears, and the unknowns of life. And slowly you realize that the most powerful form of courage is the courage to simply be yourself, to show up fully with all your doubts, fears, and imperfections in a world that often rewards conformity and performance, to speak your truth even when it shakes the foundations of your comfort zones, to embrace the uncertainty of life with an open heart. And in that realization, you find something remarkable. Life begins to feel larger, more vivid, and more meaningful, not because fear has vanished, but because you have chosen to act in spite of it. Courage isn't loud, it's honest. In choosing courage, you reclaim your power. You stop shrinking to fit expectations, and you begin to expand into the fullness of your life. You notice the difference in how you move through the world, how you hold your head, how you speak to yourself and others. You understand that courage is not a single act, but a continuous, deliberate commitment to align with your truth. And as you cultivate this courage, you also cultivate freedom. Freedom from performance, from pretense, from the exhausting effort of hiding who you are. Courage transforms everything because it is rooted in authenticity. It reshapes your relationships, your work, your sense of self, and your experience of the world. And it is available to you at any moment, in any circumstance. You only have to take the first step, a small, deliberate act of bravery that acknowledges your fear and chooses honesty anyway. The world may not always respond as you hope, but you begin to see that the most important approval is your own. And in that shift, you discover a quiet, unshakable strength, the knowledge that life, in all its uncertainty, can be met with courage, presence, and unwavering authenticity. Once courage begins to take root, life has a way of confronting you with its honesty, the quiet choices you've made to step forward, speak your truth, and show up fully start to ripple through your world in ways that are both subtle and undeniable. You notice it first in small moments, the shift in the way people respond to you, the feeling of relief that comes from no longer carrying the weight of constant approval, the sense that you are finally inhabiting your own life rather than performing for someone else. And yet, as liberating as this is, change is never simple. It brings discomfort, uncertainty, and the realization that the world you once navigated with performance as a shield will look different now. The initial stirrings of change are often disorienting. You may find yourself questioning relationships, habits, and patterns that once felt familiar. People you've relied on for validation may react with surprise, resistance, or even withdrawal. Situations that once felt safe may now feel constricting because your newfound honesty highlights the gaps between who you've been and who you are becoming. The change that follows courage is not about external circumstances being rearranged neatly. It is about your internal world shifting so profoundly that you can no longer exist comfortably in the old ways. It is as though life is asking you to reconcile the person you were with the person you're becoming. And that reconciliation can feel overwhelming at times. Fear often resurfaces in these moments, whispering that perhaps you've gone too far, that the risk was too great, that showing up fully was a mistake. You may be tempted to retreat into old patterns, to slip the mask back into place, and to return to the familiar comfort of performing. And yet in those moments, the lessons of courage remind you that retreat only postpones the inevitable, that avoidance prolongs discomfort rather than resolving it, and that true transformation demands persistence. Change, like courage, is not a single act. It is a continual process of stepping forward, confronting discomfort, and embracing the uncertainty of the unknown. You start to notice the subtleties of life revealing themselves in new ways. Conversations take on depth that was impossible when you were performing. Connections with others deepen because the interactions are no longer filtered through fear or obligation. You find yourself drawn to experiences that feel authentic, even if they are unfamiliar or challenging. Opportunities that once seemed intimidating suddenly feel possible because you are no longer constrained by the need to appear a certain way. And most importantly, you begin to recognize that the discomfort of change is not a sign of failure, but a signal of growth. Each uneasy moment, each internal struggle is proof that you are moving closer to living in alignment with your truth. Change also requires letting go of habits, patterns, and relationships that no longer serve you. Letting go of the constant need for approval, the unrelenting fear of judgment, and the compulsion to perform. You realize that some people and situations will not align with your authentic self, and that is not a reflection of inadequacy, but of divergence. Life becomes an exercise in discernment. What can I nurture? What can I release? And what can I transform? Letting go is not easy. It is messy, emotional, and at times heartbreaking, but it is also essential because the space created by release is where growth, connection, and true freedom take root. The internal shifts are profound. You begin to see patterns you previously ignored, recognize beliefs that have limited you, and confront fears that have dictated your choices for years. You notice moments where you have compromised your integrity for the sake of comfort or approval, and you feel the weight of that realization. But alongside this awareness comes a powerful sense of agency. You see clearly that change is not something that happens to you, but something you create with every decision, every choice to act in alignment with your values, and every moment you embrace discomfort instead of avoiding it. Change becomes a practice, not a passive occurrence, a commitment to living intentionally rather than merely reacting. As change takes hold, you start to notice the ways it manifests in your daily life. You approach conversations differently, with greater honesty and clarity. You allow yourself to feel emotions fully without immediately suppressing or performing to appear composed. You make decisions based on what is meaningful rather than what is expected. You notice that your energy shifts, that you move with a sense of purpose, and that the fear of judgment no longer has the same hold it once did. And in this space, you begin to experience a sense of liberation, the realization that the life you've longed for is not a distant dream, but a reality you are actively shaping with your choices. The transformation is not linear. Some days you feel grounded, aligned, and fully present. Other days, fear, doubt, and old patterns creep back in, tempting you to retreat. Change, like courage, is cyclical and iterative. It requires patience, compassion, and persistence. Each day is an opportunity to practice presence, honesty, and alignment, to choose the path that reflects who you are becoming rather than who you used to be. You learn to be gentle with yourself, to honor both the progress and the setbacks, and to recognize that the journey itself is as important as any destination. One of the most profound lessons of change is the realization that it is not about external circumstances falling into place, but about your internal landscape shifting so that life feels aligned, meaningful, and authentic. The world may not bend to your desires and relationships may transform, but the core of your being grows stronger, more resilient, and more capable of navigating uncertainty. You start to see that change is not something to fear, but something to engage with intentionally, because it is the mechanism through which life unfolds in its deepest and most transformative way. As you continue to embrace change, you begin to notice a quiet joy emerging. Not the fleeting happiness that comes from external validation, but a steady, enduring sense of peace and alignment. You recognize that life, when approached with courage and honesty, has a way of meeting you with opportunities, insights, and experiences that were previously inaccessible. You feel more present in your relationships, more grounded in your choices, and more connected to the unfolding narrative of your own life. Change has a rhythm, a subtle pulse that teaches you the art of patience, the power of presence, and the strength of authentic action. And perhaps the most remarkable aspect of this journey is the internal clarity it brings. You begin to understand that the world does not have to be controlled, that uncertainty is not to be feared, and that your worth is inherent, not dependent on performance or approval. You see that living honestly, embracing courage, and allowing change to unfold naturally are not acts of rebellion, but acts of alignment with your deepest self. You begin to recognize the quiet truth that the life you've been seeking is not a distant horizon, but a series of choices made moment by moment in alignment with who you are and who you are becoming. The truth didn't break my life, it clarified it. In embracing change, you reclaim your life. You let go of what no longer serves you, embrace what is authentic, and navigate the unknown with courage and presence. The world may shift around you, relationships may transform, and old comforts may disappear, but the internal strength you cultivate through this process becomes your foundation. You discover that change, while uncomfortable, is not something to endure, but something to engage with, because it is the bridge between the life you have been performing and the life you were always meant to live. After you have embraced courage and allowed change to ripple through your life, a new space begins to open, a space for growth. Growth is quieter than you expect, more subtle than you imagine, but it is powerful in its persistence. It is the gentle expansion of who you are, the deepening of self-awareness, and the strengthening of your capacity to live fully and authentically. This is the stage where the lessons of awareness, vulnerability, and courage converge. and you begin to notice the long-term impact of having chosen honesty over performance. Growth is not something that happens overnight. It is the result of countless small acts of showing up, of choosing presence, and of aligning your actions with your truth. The first realization of growth is internal. You notice that your relationship with yourself has changed. You are no longer negotiating every thought, word, or action to fit expectations. You have begun to trust your own judgment, honor your own feelings, and allow yourself to exist without constantly seeking approval. There is a steadying of the mind, a quiet confidence that does not require validation from others. You begin to understand that your worth is not tied to perfection, to the outcomes of your actions, or to the way others perceive you. It is inherent, a foundation that remains intact even in moments of uncertainty or failure. This realization feels profound, as if a weight you have carried for years has finally begun to lift. Growth also manifests in the way you engage with the world. You approach relationships differently, with more honesty, patience, and empathy. You are no longer performing to be liked or accepted. Instead, you connect from a place of authenticity. Conversations are deeper, interactions are more meaningful, and your presence feels grounded rather than performative. You begin to see the subtle ways that your courage and honesty influence others, creating ripples of change in the people around you. Relationships that were once superficial or strained often transform, while others that are not aligned with your truth gently fall away. This is not loss, but refinement, a clearing of the space needed to nurture connections that are real, reciprocal, and sustaining. One of the most challenging aspects of growth is the persistence of old fears. Even as you evolve, the mind can still whisper doubts. Am I enough? Will I fail? Should I retreat to the familiar comfort of performance? Growth does not eliminate fear, but it changes your response to it. You begin to notice fear as a signal rather than a verdict.
It becomes a guide, pointing to areas where courage and attention are needed.
You learn to act in spite of fear, to take steps forward even when discomfort arises, and to trust that each challenge you face is an opportunity to deepen your strength and resilience. Over time, these moments accumulate, and you notice that fear no longer holds the same power over your life. You have practiced repeatedly the art of living authentically, and your inner confidence grows with each choice. Growth also reveals the importance of self-compassion. You recognize that perfection is neither possible nor desirable, and that mistakes are an inevitable part of the journey. Instead of judging yourself harshly for missteps, you treat yourself with the same kindness and understanding you would offer a loved one. You learn to honor your feelings, acknowledge your limitations, and celebrate your progress no matter how small. This practice of compassion strengthens your resilience and allows you to navigate challenges with grace rather than resistance. It teaches you that growth is not linear and that each stage of the journey, even the setbacks, is a vital part of becoming fully alive. Another aspect of growth is the ability to live with greater presence and intentionality. You notice the way your attention has shifted toward what matters, toward experiences that nourish your soul, and toward choices that reflect your deepest values. You become more attuned to the small moments of life that once passed unnoticed, the quiet beauty of a morning, the sincerity in someone's eyes, the subtle shifts in emotion that signal connection or disconnection. This heightened awareness enriches your life, allowing you to experience it more fully and to act with intentionality rather than habit. Growth is not just about achieving goals, it is about cultivating a way of being that is alive, aware, and aligned. With growth comes a sense of freedom that was unimaginable when you were performing. You realize that you no longer need to constantly prove yourself or manage impressions. You are free to express your thoughts, follow your passions, and live in accordance with your values. This freedom is not reckless. It is grounded in honesty, courage, and self-respect. It allows you to make choices that honor your authentic self and to step into new opportunities without being constrained by fear or expectation. You begin to see that life is not about fulfilling someone else's script, but about writing your own story, moment by moment, choice by choice. Growth also brings a deeper understanding of connection and empathy. As you embrace your own authenticity, you become more attuned to the experiences of others. You recognize that everyone is navigating their own struggles, fears, and performances, and this awareness cultivates compassion. You listen more deeply, respond more thoughtfully, and hold space for others without judgment. Your growth enhances your capacity to love, support, and understand, not because it is expected, but because it flows naturally from your own alignment and integrity. In this way, your journey of authenticity ripples outward, touching the lives of those around you in subtle yet meaningful ways. Finally, growth leads to a profound sense of fulfillment. It is not the fleeting satisfaction of external success, but the enduring contentment that comes from living authentically. You notice the quiet pride in your own presence, the serenity in making choices that align with your values, and the joy in experiencing life fully without pretense. You understand the journey itself is the reward. The daily practice of awareness, vulnerability, courage, and honesty is what cultivates a life that is rich, meaningful, and deeply satisfying. This sense of fulfillment is a testament to the resilience, courage, and authenticity you have nurtured, and it becomes the foundation for the life you continue to build. I stopped performing and finally felt at home. In this stage, you realize that growth is the culmination of all the steps you have taken: awareness, vulnerability, courage, and change. It is the embodiment of a life lived fully, with intention and integrity. You see clearly that the performance, the fear, and the old patterns were never the real obstacles. They were invitations to discover your strength, your worth, and your capacity for authentic living. Growth is the reward for showing up fully, for facing discomfort, for choosing honesty over approval, and for trusting yourself enough to take each step forward. It is the natural unfolding of a life lived in alignment with who you truly are. And as growth settles into your being, you notice a quiet confidence that feels unshakable. It is not loud or boastful. It does not require external recognition. It is a steady, grounded knowledge that you are enough, that your presence matters, and that the choices you make in alignment with your truth will continue to shape a life of depth, connection, and meaning. Growth is not the end of the journey. It is the unfolding of it, a continuous practice of showing up, learning, and expanding into the fullness of your own life.